Let's get started. Okay, so we are going to talk about stress and different types of coping. So there's problem focused coping, which essentially means that you are dealing with the problem at hand. So if you're stressed about something, you're going to directly deal with the problem. So if you're stressed about a test, you might study more to prepare for the test, or you might go over your notes more. Emotion focused coping is going to be a situation where you don't change the situation, but you feel better about it. So let's say that you were stressed about the test. You might tell yourself, I'm stressed, but at least I get to attend school and at least I have the opportunity to pursue my career compared to folks who don't. Both of these things can be, and there's a lot of different ways you can use this. If you need more examples, I am here. Both of these things can help to reduce your physical reaction to stress. So we talked about maybe a slide or so ago about how when you are stressed, your body actually responds in a certain way. And both of these things can help to reduce that. Another thing that you could use is social support. So you'll notice this when you watch the video about the mothers who have children with disabilities. You'll notice that they use social support to basically cope with and deal with the stress that they experience. So there are different types of coping styles. So one being a hardy coping style. So these are individuals who, when they have a difficult situation, they generally tend to respond with optimism. So they generally tend to see how they could use that situation or how they could kind of work through that situation. And most of us respond to most situations in life with resilience. So even though we kind of concentrate on folks who are unable to do that or folks who have a difficult time, the vast majority of us will show resilience even in very difficult times, which is great. Now, what are some ways that are possibly not so helpful to cope with stress? Defensive coping. So this is when somebody says something to you and you're like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm okay. You're not. Or emotional insulation. So these are when folks, another way to think about this is folks who compartmentalize. So they'll talk about a particular thing that's bothered them and they'll like put it aside, but they won't really deal with it. And so over the course of time, they have all these emotions that they haven't actually worked through or experienced. And then inadvertently, something might basically set them off and they experience all of those things at one time. So what are some things that you could do? You want to try to get as much control mentally, at least. And I don't mean control like your thoughts. What I mean is like you want to be able to control your environment and your situation, because we know that when you can create that sense of control by using your time and deciding what you're going to do with your time and your money, etc., you tend to feel better. Looking at a threat is a challenge. So if someone presents a threat to you, you could look at it as a challenge to grow and be better. So malnourished children. So a lot of these things at the top of the PowerPoint actually refer to places where children are not getting enough food or nutrients. That's not the United States. The United States Social Service Program has made children who are starving to death very unlikely. What we do have in the United States is undernutrition. So what that means is that folks have access to food. They are not starving, but they do not have enough nutrients. And so what I mean by that is they don't have enough varied nutrients in their diet. And so this can be associated with cognitive developmental issues and other issues because they have food, but it's not always healthy and good food. All right, threats to health and wellness later when you're a little kid. So in other parts of the lifespan. So the biggest threat to preschoolers are colds. Preschoolers catch a lot of colds. This is the most common illness that they experience. And if you ever, my first job out of high school was working at a daycare. And I can tell you that first year, I was constantly sick, okay, because they are constantly getting sick. And it's par for the course. So something else that we're going to talk about is, and all of these things are the lead causes of death or threats to health. So what you see down here are things like lead poisoning. That's a big concern. Children not wearing helmets, basically accidents. Accidents are the lead cause of death until you're over 33. So something else we're going to talk about today is something called SIDS. SIDS stands for Sudden Infant Death Syndrome, and this is essentially when your baby stops breathing. So, I thought I had another slide about this, but clearly I don't. So what increases the likelihood that your child will experience SIDS? Different things that they could be exposed to in the home. So if they're smoking in the home, it increases the possibility that they will suffer from SIDS. If they were born prematurely, it increases the likelihood that they will suffer from SIDS. One of the things that folks have prescribed to help with or to reduce the chances of SIDS, besides the Back to Sleep campaign, so that's putting your baby on their back. You want to practice safe sleep, so they sleep in a different place than you and they sleep on their back. And then you also want to give them a pacifier at night, because they know that children who have pacifiers tend to die of SIDS at a much lower rate. So what is concerning for our teenagers? That being a teenager is the healthiest time of your life. You will never get that back. Okay, so as you get older, it tends to kind of wane off. So just keep that in mind. So if you see an influencer and they're 19 and they look great, right, that's the best time of their life. Catch them at 50. Let's see how things go. Anyway, I digress. So what are some things that are threats to health and wellness? STDs, accidents, like we talked about. One of the things that contributes to folks thinking that drugs and alcohol is more common is because of something called the false consensus effect, or basically this idea that you know everyone else is doing it. And so even though they're not. So like you don't have any poll results to tell you that it's common. You just assume it's more common because you hear about it more often. So basically this idea, if you hear or see something, you assume that that behavior is much more common than what it is. And when you think it's more common, you're more likely to engage in it. So it's really about getting students the correct information, or high schoolers the correct information. So if you think everybody is drinking on campus, you're more inclined to drink than if you don't. Even though most students report that everybody is doing something, that's not necessarily true. So like I've had a college student tell me that everyone was using like certain types of drugs. And then when you look at survey results from a particular school institution, that's not necessarily true. But because they see it, or because those things stand out to them, they assume it's more common.